Good morning, everybody. Oh, coffee. Coffee is like oxygen, right? So a couple things. I apologize for not coming on live last week. I fully intended to, as you saw from my post. And then as things happen, life got in the way and I just couldn't get back here in time to jump on. So it would appear that that is going to happen again today. So instead of doing a live, I just decided I'd jump on today and just do a video and talk about shame, which is what I wanted to talk about before. So if you are reading my newest book, Awakening Black Elk Girl, there is a chapter in here on shame, and it is chapter 4. And, you know, for those of us in recovery, for those that are struggling to obtain recovery, for anyone who's really dealing with recovery in any way, and then especially layering in sexual trauma and sexual abuse, shame is probably the number one challenge that you have, the number one thing that you face, that you deal with. And so there's a whole chapter in here about it because it is so pivotal and it's so universal. It is one of those, I mean, I don't know how many survivors I have engaged in my lifetime, but shame is always that one ever present, ever prevalent thing that we all have. And it also is that one trigger and that one relapse factor for so many of us. And for such a long time, I never understood my shame, right? Like I was raped as a child and the immediate feeling I had was shame, right? And I didn't understand that because shame, the way it presents and shows up in us, is really in a self-loathing, kind of blaming, self-hating way. And it's so counterintuitive when something really bad happens to you that you didn't create, that you didn't cause, for you to have an immediate response of feeling like you're to blame, like you're a bad person, like you're unworthy, is really hard. It's really hard to like reconcile that in your brain. And all it does is beat yourself up. And for me, it presented in major self-loathing. And I really struggled with feeling like it wasn't my fault. Like I thought, oh, it must be my fault because I'm awash in these like emotions that are telling me I'm bad and that I did this. And so I went to a conference years ago, and this PhD kind of candidate was there doing this whole presentation on shame, and he was really connecting it to your brain, which I'm obsessed with neurobiology, just because you can learn so much about everything when you learn about what happens in your brain, right? And he was talking about trauma, and he was talking about addiction, and he was talking about the connections between shame and the role that shame plays when we're traumatized, and then how that links directly into addiction, right? So very much what I've been training on for years, but I've never associated the neurobiology part of it until this moment when I met him. So he talked about things that happen in our addiction that we're ashamed about, and how shame shows up for us, and how that shame then propels us into use. And then he talked about and then he showed like brain images, right? And I have all this in the book. And he showed like where shame kind of shows up in the brain, and then how it links itself into these negative coping mechanisms, predominantly addiction. And then he started talking about what it's like to just experience a traumatic event. And the event he used was being hit by a truck. And I was like, okay, what does this have to do with anything? But he talks about a person who came into the emergency room, was hit by a truck, and then had been kind of evaluated. And then he put her brain up on a screen. And the shame indicators that like kind of lit up in her brain were identical to the shame indicators that lit up in an addict's brain, in the same like scans that he was looking at with people who were dealing with shame and then chronic relapse. And it like hit me. What he was saying was that shame isn't really emotional, it's biological. So for me, being very pragmatic, being very type A, I'm better when I have all the information and then I can understand something, because then I can approach it properly. So for me, I was like, oh my God, holy shit. My shame isn't really mine. It's something that happened in my brain because of this other horrible act that was perpetrated upon me. And so my brain is just having this really normal, natural response to this really horrible, abnormal event. And what it did for me is it took that shame off my chest and it placed it in proper context, where I felt like I didn't have to own it, right? Like it wasn't a moral failing, another moral failing of mine. That's what it felt. I felt free when he told me that. Because again, for me, it's kind of like when I got clean and sober and I realized that I was powerless over my addiction. And that as long as I didn't pick up that first drink or that first drug, that I had a sense of control. Because I guess, type A, Enneagram 8, a little bit of a control freak. It helped me. And I was like, oh, okay, so I just don't pick up that first. Because when I pick up that first, I'm no longer in control. This thing happens to me that I can't contain or control. The way that he described shame and being biological was very similar for me. It actually gave me this freedom to forgive myself. And it gave me this freedom to release shame back into the world. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't still show up for me. And that's why I have a whole chapter in here on it. And I encourage you to read the chapter. I have a really good, very current example of shame and the way it presented in my life. Do you hear my little 5-year-old? He's a part of that story. And so the thing I love so much about Awakening Blackout Girl is it's like part memoir, part self-help. But so I share a story of something that happened last Christmas with my son and how I just had this incredible shame. And so, I encourage you to read the book. I encourage you to do the exercise, do the mantra, share with me how it's going for you, what you're learning from it. But one of the concepts I introduce in this book is the idea of shame spiraling. And that conjures a vision, right? Shame spiraling for me is something that I do. It's this kind of rabbit hole that I have a tendency to go into, actually that my brain has a tendency to go into. And it is literally the worst version of myself showing up to beat myself up. And it feels exhausting and it feels out of control. Sometimes it's a part of a panic attack. I used to experience shame spiraling at night predominantly when I would be trying to go to sleep, right? Or I would fall asleep and then I would wake up and my head would fill with all of the things that I was worried about. And then I would start to apply all those worries to myself and blame myself for not being able to figure out the solution to all those worries. And I would just spiral down and down and down and down into this pit of despair where all I was doing was beating myself up, and it would result in a panic or an anxiety attack. So I introduced this concept of shame spiraling because I know I'm not alone. I know that you probably experience this too. And there's this really great method that I use, a couple of different methods that I use to try to figure out how to remove myself from that shame spiral and realize and know that like any other emotion or feeling, it will pass. It's not going to kill me. So I encourage you to read the book and to kind of look at your own situation and how shame shows up for you in your life, and let me know how it goes and share that with me. I have my niece and her boyfriend in town, so we're gonna just have a nice slow start to the morning. I'm gonna make some French toast for them. I'm gonna jump on my Peloton because I always do. I'm going to finish what this is. I'm sure you're looking at my nails like, what the hell happened? So I have a habit of going to the store when I want to find a nail polish, and I will literally like try on every color until I find the one that I like the most. So that's what this is. So I did that yesterday. So I will do that. I'm going to engage in some self-care because it is Sunday. So, definitely do some good reading, do some good work on yourself, some self-care work, reading, and, mental health work is important. Engaging mental wellness is vital. But it's also important to just kind of also just do some really wonderful, lovely, juicy, amazing things for yourself. Like take a bubble bath, have your partner or somebody massage you, read a book that has nothing to do with anything but just a way for you to fall into an amazing story and get out of your head, right? So do something wonderful for yourself. Engage in self-care in some way. And I will see you back here next week. And I do believe that I am available to go live next week. I do have something on my schedule, but I think it's going to happen after 11. So I should be able to actually go live. But until then, enjoy this video. And thank you as always. Also, somehow I hit 2,000 followers overnight. And so thank you to all the new people that are coming to my Instagram account. And hopefully you're getting something out of it. If it's not silly pictures of my wife and my kid and my pets, hopefully it's some good self-care stuff. So be good to yourself. And until next week, I'll talk to you later. Bye.